I just wanted to ask you, in light of this mind-matter interaction and this notion of radiation coming off of the body, different traditions hold the answer to this question differently, but what happens when we die? And how does what you understand about science and also the spiritual traditions impact, you know, when you think about quantum holography or any way that you want to answer that question? Okay. What can we say today about that ontological question about what happens when we die?
Well, I wish we had an answer to that. One of our early investors in Noetics, almost 40 years ago, told me, Edgar, I would like for you to investigate this very question of what happens when we die. I said, John, I would be delighted to investigate and understand what happens to consciousness when we die. But first of all, I've got to find out what consciousness is, because we do not know, in scientific terms at least, what it is. We know we're all conscious. We know that we're now knowing that all matter, living matter, is conscious, and consciousness even goes down into what we consider non-living matter. It starts in the quantum world. We're quite sure of that. But we do not have any definitive experimental evidence in science. Now, we have a lot of lore from all of our traditions, all over the world, all cultural traditions, have lore about the survival of consciousness after death and what happens to us. But science cannot answer that question. We've approached it in many different ways, but we still do not have a definitive answer that we can rely upon. That's one of our great hopes, that Dr. Schlitz and myself and all of our research people, we're going to find the experimental evidence that will give us a positive answer to that question. Now, we're getting closer, but we aren't there yet. Okay? Okay, over to you. What you got? Anybody got points you want to make? Go.
What was your first thought when you landed on the moon?
What was the thought? I landed on the moon?
Yeah.
What more can an explorer want than go where people have never been, gather data, take pictures, look around, bring back samples, and tell the people what you saw? Well, that was my exhilarating moment, was to realize we were at a place where people had never been, and I was privileged enough to be an explorer that could go there, do some investigation, bring back some samples, take some pictures, and tell you and the people what it's all about.
I was wondering, when you just felt that kind of, I don't know, revelation when you were looking out at the three heavenly bodies, and you just felt this new feeling, you know, did you feel like that experience kind of opened up something new in you, or did it give you a new idea, or did it just kind of tap on something, awaken something in you that was already part of you, that was already there?
I can answer that from future research. It opens up something in us that we all have. That another way to call it, I often call it the mountaintop experience, or the big picture effect, to see what we already know, but in a different perspective, and to see it in a grander scale, like a mountaintop where you look at everything else below, or the bigger picture like there of seeing Earth, which around us here is everywhere, but you see out there something like this. So you're seeing a much larger frame in which you must put that which you're seeing, and that was the ecstasy part of it. And one of the things that this is a private, personal interpretation of this, but that since I said, in virtually every culture, we have evidence of this type of experience taking place among wise people, mystics, and so forth.
And children.
And children. The so-called big picture effect. Aha. Wow. Okay. We have that in every culture. And so the real question for us in noetic sciences, how do we describe this in terms of science? What is it? Where does it come from? How does it get here? And where we are so far, we're now quite sure it's rooted in the quantum nature of reality, that we have to use quantum physics to understand our emotional, mental, feeling states. And we're making progress on that. And I'm hopeful that as we introduce quantum understanding deeper into our research, that we will be able to answer these questions better. One of the things I wanted to pass on to you, Dr. Schlitz used the word quantum holography. One of our colleagues about 10 years ago, who happens to be a descendant of Kepler, Dr. Schimpf in Germany, discovered that the Max Planck radiation, I mentioned earlier, that Planck made the discovery of black body radiation, that all objects, our bodies, this, everything, emits particles of light. What Dr. Schimpf discovered was those emissions are quantum entangled, coherent, holographic, and carry information about us. We say our intuition is our sixth sense. No, it should be our first sense, because it's rooted in the quantum reality which is around long before our sensory mechanism, long before our solar system and our planet were around. It is a first cause information structure in nature. And that's what the quantum world, the quantum information world is all about. And discovering that these emissions from our body are coherent and entangled and provide us information is a very, very powerful discovery. Now let me give you an example of how it works. If you haven't yet, you will perhaps in your life go into some great cathedral that has been standing for 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, and you will sense a feeling of hush, of awe, of reverence in that cathedral. Why? Just a building. Because for 100, 500, or 1,000 years, human beings have been going into that building on their best behavior with a sense of hush, awe, and reverence, because the people going into it are very steeped in their belief system, whether it be Christian, Islamic, or whatever. And they're in a sense of hush, awe, and reverence. The emissions from their body exhibiting hush, awe, and reverence are going out, are being absorbed into that building and being thrown out to subsequent generations. That's what quantum holography is all about. You get these experiences in these cathedrals because prior visitors have been emanating hush, awe, and reverence, and the building is throwing it back at you. What we have learned from this is that nature and evolution is a learning system, as opposed to what Darwin said in the 19th century. Lamarck, 50 years earlier, had proposed that evolution is a learning process. And we now know that's absolutely true, thanks to the quantum hologram, thanks to what we've observed. And one of the most powerful evidences of that, if you go into the Marianas Trench in the deep ocean, in the Pacific Ocean, go down several thousands of feet to the very bottom of the ocean, where it's very close to the magma and the hot waters are coming up in the deep ocean, you'll find a totally different set of species of denizens, of animals in that deep part of the ocean, unlike anything we find in shallow waters. So they have evolved around that deep oceanic heat coming up from the center quite differently than anything else on Earth. It was really a surprise to all biologists that got down there and looked at that. Totally different stuff. That's the difference that's what we're talking about. We're talking about this way the universe is put together and nature is put together is becoming quite different. We understand it, starting to understand it quite differently than our predecessors did even a few decades ago.